All right, so are you ready to get a little spooky? Because today we are taking a deep dive into the brilliant and twisted mind of Edgar Allan Poe.
And of course, we can't talk Poe without diving into one of his most famous works.
Yeah, you guessed it, The Telltale Heart.
Now, this story is a classic for a reason.
Oh yeah, and bonus, it's probably on your Bachelor of Arts syllabus, so you're going to want to listen closely because this deep dive is going to help you understand this story inside and out.
That's right, ace those exams.
Okay, so for anyone who needs a little refresher, Poe was a key figure in the American Romantic movement, but his style was,
Yeah?
well, a little darker than some of his contemporaries.
Yeah, he was all about those dark, psychological tales, exploring the shadowy parts of the human experience.
And boy, was he good at it. So The Telltale Heart, I mean, the title itself is already creepy, right?
It really sets the tone, doesn't it?
It does. But just in case, like, super quick plot summary, we've got an unnamed narrator who's obsessed with an old man.
Well, not just obsessed with the old man, obsessed with his eye.
Yeah, that creepy vulture eye. And this obsession ultimately leads to murder.
And this is where things get really interesting. See, Poe is famous for using unreliable narrators, characters who tell the story, but you can't really trust what they're saying.
Okay, so unreliable narrator, like he might not be telling us the whole truth or even an accurate version of the truth.
Exactly. And The Telltale Heart is like the textbook example of an unreliable narrator.
That's interesting. So how do we know we can't fully trust the narrator in The Telltale Heart?
Well, think about it. The narrator keeps saying, I'm not mad, I'm perfectly sane. But his actions tell a different story, right? I mean, the way he plans and carries out this murder,
Yeah.
the way he talks about that eye, it's all pretty disturbing.
Okay, so red flag number one.
Mm-hmm.
He might not be as sane as he claims to be,
Yeah.
but what about that eye? That vulture eye? It's like intensely symbolic, isn't it? It's more than just a creepy physical trait.
Absolutely. Poe was a master of symbolism. And that eye, it represents so much. On one hand, it's the object of the narrator's fear and disgust. But on a deeper level, it could also be interpreted as a symbol of the narrator's own guilt.
Ooh, interesting. So like he's projecting his own internal darkness onto the old man.
Exactly. The eye could represent something within himself that he wants to destroy or oppress, something he finds shameful or terrifying.
And then there's the heartbeat, right? That pounding heartbeat that just echoes throughout the story.
Mhm.
What's Poe doing with that? What's he trying to tell us?
Well, the heartbeat is a powerful symbol of the narrator's guilt and paranoia. Every thump is a reminder of his crime, even when there's no logical reason for him to hear it. It's like a physical manifestation of his psychological torment.
And Poe is so clever with how he uses it. Like we're hearing that heartbeat too as readers. We're experiencing that growing sense of dread right alongside the narrator.
He pulls us into that psychological space, makes us feel the weight of the narrator's guilt and fear.
Speaking of fear, that climax where the narrator cracks under the pressure and confesses, oh man, talk about intense.
It's a perfect example of dramatic irony, isn't it?
Wow.
We, the audience, know the truth, but the police are clueless. The narrator's guilt is so consuming that he can't keep up the facade.
He believes they can hear the heartbeat too. It just shows how completely his paranoia has taken over.
And ultimately, that's his downfall. His own conscience betrays him.
Okay, so we've talked about the unreliable narrator, the symbolism, the dramatic irony. For our listeners who are, say, staring down an essay question about the Telltale Heart, what's the key takeaway? What should they be focusing on?
Well, it's all about understanding the layers of meaning, right? Don't just get caught up in the surface level plot. Think about the characters, their motivations, Poe's use of symbolism, the mood and tone he creates with his language.
So don't just write the narrator is crazy, the end.
Right, exactly. Dig deeper, analyze those symbols. Talk about how Poe uses the vulture eye, the heartbeat, the unreliable narrator to build this chilling psychological portrait of guilt and madness.
And use specific examples from the text. Show your professor that you've really thought about the nuances of the story.
Definitely.
Now, before we wrap up, I have one last question. And this is something I've been thinking about. Do you think, could this whole story be a metaphor? I mean, could the old man represent a part of the narrator himself? Something he wants to hide or repress?
That's a really interesting interpretation. And it's definitely plausible. Poe often used his stories to explore complex psychological themes. So it wouldn't be surprising if there were layers of meaning beyond the literal events of the story.
Wow. There's always more to uncover with Poe, isn't there? So to our listeners, I encourage you to go back and read The Telltale Heart again. Keep these points in mind. Think about those symbols. Pay attention to how Poe uses language to create those feelings of suspense and dread. And remember, understanding these literary techniques will not only make you a more insightful reader, but it'll also help you write amazing essays that will seriously impress your professors.
And who knows, maybe you'll even start to hear that heartbeat yourself.
Okay, maybe not that last part.
But hey, happy reading.
And good luck with those exams.
You got this.
Until next time.
See you then.